Good morning, everybody. How you doing? Happy Sunday. Hope you guys are doing well. I just had a few thoughts going back into Christianity and the Bible, and I just had a few thoughts, a few questions I wanted to really point out to our Christian audience and maybe get a little participation in the comment section. Let me know what you think about this question. This is concerning KJVonlyist, in other words, King James Bible version only readers, people that only read the King James Bible for whatever reason, right? So I had a few thoughts about it. I mean, I kind of know, what the King James Bible, where it came from, who was authorized by, so I wish to kind of speak about one of this influential text in the pretty much in the English speaking world. The King James Bible was authorized in 1604 by King James I of England at the Hampton Court Conference. The translation project was meant to really unify religious practice among English Protestants, right? And provide like a version free from what some saw as the partisan bias of early translations, such as the Geneva Bible. So like after 7 years of careful labor by a team, I think it's like roughly 50 or so scholars, the King James Bible was first published in 1611 at that time, right? Its cadence, its rhythm, the poetic force, it's all sort of shaped, English literature, culture, and our preaching we hear in sermons even till today over the last 4 centuries, right? So the King James Bible, it didn't emerge from a vacuum. It was based largely on earlier English translations, especially William Tyndale's pioneering work, The Bishop's Bible, and that was published in 1568. And, to a lesser degree, the Geneva Bible. And so, of course, Old Testament, the translators used the Hebrew Masoretic text, and for the New Testament, they relied primarily on the Erasmus Greek Textus Receptus, a compilation that itself drew on a limited number of late medieval manuscripts itself, right? So these sources, while really valuable, were not as extensive as the manuscript evidence that later translators would be able to consult. Okay, so there's a lot more information that came out over those hundreds of years. So because of this, Christian scholars have long pointed out that the King James Version contains, a lot of mistranslations and interpretive choices that can really distort the meaning. For example, scholar F.F. Bruce, a respected 20th century Bible scholar, he noted that the KJV translators sometimes imported ecclesiastical terms to sort of support Anglican practices rather than really staying close to the Greek text. And like N.T. Wright, who's another leading scholar, has highlighted how certain passages in like Paul's letters were rendered in ways that obscured Paul's nuanced theology of like justification, for example. And lastly, I'll point out another scholar, D.A. Carson. He's like an influential New Testament scholar and had written about how some KJV renderings, such as charity instead of love in 1 Corinthians 13, can confuse some modern readers about the intent of the original Greek. So in short, while the King James Bible remains like a literary masterpiece and a historic milestone, it's important to recognize, though, its limitations as a translation. Well, I would just suggest read other Bible translations. It's not the only Bible you're allowed to read from. In fact, we know for a fact that it has, problems. But why are the KJV onlyists out there when they contain all these clear mistranslations according to Christian scholars? Ignorance, superstition, tradition. There can be a lot of reasons. I'll give you a few examples. Another example, say like 1 John 5, 7, and 8. Now this section is kind of known as the Comma Johanneum, and was later added based on medieval Latin sources, not original Greek manuscripts. So modern critical scholarship excludes it due to the lack of textual basis. And we can kind of look at it if you go to 1 John 5, 7 and 8, and I'll pull it up and I'll just read it from the KJV, and it reads this way: "For there are three that bear record in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost, and these three are one." Right? That's from the KJV. But let's look at, another Bible. Let's see. I like New American Revised, or New American Standard Bible is a good translation. It reads a little different. It says, "For there are three that testify, the Spirit and the water and the blood, and the three are in agreement." Notice these are totally different. This later translation says, Paul, testifies about the Spirit, the water, and the blood, and the three are in agreement. Whereas the King James Bible says it's the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost, and the three are one. This sounds like a promotion of the Trinity. So they're sort of adding in doctrine, in the translation, right? And that's not a very genuine thing to do. Isaiah 14:12, King James translation is, "O Lucifer, son of the morning," right? A better translation might be, "Shining one, son of the dawn." The Hebrew phrase here is referring metaphorically to a fallen Babylonian king, not the devil. And so by importing the Latinized Lucifer, the KJV actually fosters a tradition of using it as a proper name for Satan. And if you ask most Christians today, they tend to look at Lucifer as Satan. And all that's based on this mistranslation of the Bible. So are we really after truth or tradition? Another one, Acts 12, verse 4. The KJV translation is from the word Easter. But a better translation, of course, would be Passover. So the Greek Pascha always means Passover. By using Easter, a later Christian observance and holiday, it misrepresents the original Jewish festival in context. And that's deeply rooted in the narrative. We can go on to other things if you want. Numbers 23, verse 22, Deuteronomy 33, verse 17, Job 39, 9 through 10, Psalms 22, verse 21. This is where the KJV translates the word for wild ox as a unicorn. And you see, the KJV follows the Latin Vulgate, unicornus. This leads readers to imagine a mythical creature rather than a strong-horned animal. It's a vivid example of how literal adherence to prior translations can really distort meanings. You know what I'm saying? So this gets down, for me, philosophically and psychologically and spiritually. Why do people cling to things? Why do we let tradition, superstition cause so much fear and anxiety that we're willing to overlook, problems in our belief system or worldview, especially weighed against the evidence? Like I've just presented evidence that would, show doubt, cast a little doubt on the King James Bible as a translation. There's better translations. We've got more information. And, you can consult with most of your scholarship who actually understand this. You know what I'm saying? So that was just a few thoughts I had. I did a little study last night. after talking to someone online about KJV. You know, he was a KJV only person. So I thought I would really drop this video for him to kind of look at, to kind of see what I'm saying. Because sometimes in text, things get lost and we don't really cover points because we're going back and forth and it gets really weird. That's why I really don't like doing conversations online. I'd much rather do videos and have live conversations one-on-one. It's not perfect, but for me, it's a lot better. But anyways, I just kind of wanted to put this out there. And please, audience, Christians, if you have any thought about why the KJV is the best translation and why you adhere to it, leave a comment, please. And alternately, if you don't see it that way, explain why in the comments section. I just want to get a gauge on whether I'm really correct to say a lot of Christians like to hold to the KJV. I know a lot of and I'm just basing this on a few conversations I've had with evangelical fundamentalist sort of Christian types. You know what I'm saying? So it might not really represent, you know, the masses, obviously. So, but anyways, I just want to get your word on that. Thank you so much, and peace. I just wanted to make a really short video on this, so you guys have a great Sunday. In fact, bye bye.